I've got 8 o'clock, Allison, but I'm not sure. I think we should give it another couple minutes. I'm not sure everyone's on board yet.
Sure. Who is Galaxy Tab A?
Now we got Paul coming in, so that might be our quorum.
Yeah, I believe that's
if you didn't hear, we've got someone signed in as a Galaxy Tab A. Is there someone on a Galaxy phone, possibly?
You're correct, though. I believe once Dan Gabbio connects, we will have, actually, no, that'll only be 4. We'll need one more.
We need 5.
Yes. I did hear from Ian, and he's unable to join us this morning.
Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Allison.
Morning, Dan,
This
is that you?
Dan Gabbio, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, John Hughes, is that you?
Yes.
Okay, we have our 5.
Okay.
Hey, before we get
Morning,
started,
everyone.
John, are you a TAC member or are you an executive board member?
Both.
Also,
Right now, I'm substituting for a public works director or a supervisor since we have neither.
Are you getting paid by Dewey Humboldt then to work for them?
I should be, but no.
Yeah, because I noticed your name on there, John, and so you're going to become an executive board member too?
Yes.
You know, I'm not really one typically for bylaws, but I don't know if that's really kind of cricket, you know, representing both boards. No, I don't want to be.
No, that's understandable. So that's fine. And as this we speak today, we do not have a town manager either. So the mayor's doing the duties of everybody right now.
John, I understand. So I don't want to appear harsh. I just, you know, this being a public body.
That's fine. I will log off of this one if that's not going to cause any conflicts for anybody else today.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that to you, but I think it might be nice just to err on the side of caution.
Understandable and really reasonable, so no problem. You guys have a great day, and I will try to get someone to fill the position as soon as it's possible.
And you're welcome to attend, John, via, YouTube or however we need to do that. But as long as you don't vote.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
Why don't you stay on the line?
Understandable. Okay.
So why don't you stay on the line if the rest of the group's okay? And I'm pushing my way in. I'm just saying, what's the rest of the TAC think? But John's an elected. We ought to let him attend the meeting, but make sure he doesn't vote or be considered part of the agenda. Frank, you okay with that?
Well, I'm just wondering because I've got someone on another board that's both on the TAC and on the executive board. So I didn't know that was an issue.
Well, who do you have on the TAC? You're on the TAC, though, Frank, and you're a voting member. My point is
different
organization.
It's a different organization.
So, Norm, this is Dan. Before we make a decision, why don't we confirm on the bylaws if it's okay or not?
Yeah, I'm looking through them right now as we speak.
And I'm sorry to bring up the problem for you guys this morning.
Not a problem, John.
John, so tell me, I got to look at my card file, but who was your assistant public works director? You know, when...
that was Jason Berg, and he is gone. Ed's gone. Ed never filled a position for 2 years, so Jason was kind of the supervisor. And then Mr. Smith is running the show now, and we are not able to hire anybody at the time because the town manager was an interim, but the council fired him on Tuesday night. So now we're down 3 or 4 people there. And so this is why I'm doing the positions.
Well, great. And I'm sympathetic to your plight. We want to keep you guys involved too. Just make sure we don't misstep, you know?
Yes, correct. Understandable.
I have some clarification for the CYMPO bylaws here. For TAC membership, it states TAC committee members are appointed by the participating agencies, and they serve at the pleasure of the participating agency that appointed them. So,
all right. Yeah, since I don't get a paycheck, I'll just be an observer today, and then we'll try to get. I'll try to get Mr. Smith to help us out here.
Yeah, and the way I read that, Allison, is that it's up to the participating councils or whatever organizational form that agency is. ADOT's a little different, but they're the ones that assign to the TAC. I don't even know if it necessarily would need a vote of a council. It might just be a letter from the town or city manager.
Well, okay.
But I'll leave that. Maybe when Vinny comes on board, he can help us wade through that a little bit.
Okay.
Give him a good duty for his first week in there.
Okay. So in that case, we have.
Okay, but do we have let's go ahead and get started though, and see if we can get through this. So I guess I'll go ahead and, Allison, if you're okay, I'll call roll call if you can keep track of it for me. And we can work it out in the future. But Vice Chair Norm Davis?
Present.
Thank you. So John Hughes, Dewey of Humboldt, you're here, and we may just hold off on votes just in case.
That's fine. Here.
Okay. Ian Mattingly, Allison, you said he couldn't make it?
Correct.
Okay. Dan Cherry?
Present.
Thank you. Dan Gibbio?
Present.
John Latier? Okay, John's not with us. And we have a vacant position with Prescott Forest, so, and I'm Frank Marbury, Tennessee Valley present. So, we got a quorum, Allison, I think?
Well, we have 4 in attendance with John Hughes. That would be 5. And the quorum is going to be 5 in our committee of 8.
Okay, even with the vacant position?
Correct.
So, okay, so we'll move on. Consideration and possible action to approve the October 1st, 2020 special meeting minutes of the Technical Advisory Committee. Everyone's read the minutes. Any comments or corrections on those? Or any discussion?
No discussion, Mr. Chair, but I have read them, and I'd like to make a motion that they be approved without any objections.
I'll second it. This is Norm with the. I'll second it. Norm with the town.
All right, I have a motion by Dan and a second by Norm. Allison, can you give us a roll call vote? That's easier on the Zoom.
Sure. Chairman Marbury?
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
Member Hughes?
Yes, if it's possible to vote.
Thank you. Member Cherry?
Yes.
Member Gabbio?
Aye.
Thank you. 5 in favor, the motion passes.
Okay. Next up, agency announcements and updates. I'll just go down the list. I'll start. Chino Valley, we've got a big slurry seal project we're kind of proud of and starting off. First time since I've been here, we spent $1 million of local money on the roads at one time. So we're looking forward to that. Got some other nice projects in the work, so hopefully we'll start catching up on some of our local roads. ADOT may talk about it a little later, but the Road 1 North signal, I think, is going to the state board this month, so hopefully that'll keep moving forward. And those that don't know, Cecilia Gritman is in the process of retiring. We've got her for one more month as a consultant, but Cindy Blackmore officially started as the new town manager this week. So we're excited to see how that's going to work in the town. So that's pretty much the basics for Chino. Norm, have you got anything for Prescott Valley?
Yeah, I do. Regional roads of significance for Prescott Valley. Real happy that the Viewpoint connector is coming along very well. Obviously, that's going to connect up to the 89A Viewpoint interchange. That's 8,000 feet of new roadway alignment. But that's a $7.5 million project funded with our 1/3 cent sales tax. And we look forward to a ribbon cutting ceremony and opening that up in mid-March. So what's interesting about that, we have two major north-south routes, and we just did a separate consultant study. What's interesting to the TAC group was Glassford and Robert were our only roadways. When we open Viewpoint, we anticipate 5,000 cars a day. Basically, it's everything north of 89A on Viewpoint coming down to points, south in the core or north. So I thought that was interesting. Open a brand new road and I'll get 5,000 cars a day and help the service life of both those major corridors that have been the only north-south connectors, being Glassford and Robert. So we look forward to that ribbon cutter somewhere in March. Other two projects is we move forward to award with our development impact fees. We're going to, at the Glassford Spouse intersection, we're going to move those existing poles to accommodate the proposed third lane in the future. And we're going to add a fourth leg into a new park called Santa Fe Station Park. So as I mentioned, that's development impact fees collected from new housing development. So that funding source is $750,000 of, collecting it from building permits. So that works very well for us. And likewise, we have another development impact fee study our project going on is Viewpoint Drive north of 89A. We did the northbound lanes last year, and we cooperated with the developer that we are, between his half funding and our development impact fee, we're going to go ahead and fund the southbound Viewpoint. So that's going to add some good capacity there for, Viewpoint Drive to all those particular, housing developments north of 89A. So we look forward to that project, and both those projects will be done this spring. Those are my updates.
Thank you, Norm. John, this is just where we kind of give an update of maybe some of the projects or activities you've got going on that might be of interest to the other CYMPO members. Have you got anything in Dewey Humboldt you want to mention?
Yes. So we have a CBG grant for sidewalk improvement on one of our corridors around the school down there on Hill Street. And then we also just purchased another snow plow for our area, so trying to help our citizens out as much as we can. Other than that, it's just our normal maintenance for our roadways and that, but that CBG grant was a big plus to the citizens there to get some sidewalks and some road improvement on the sides right there by the grade school. Other than that, that's it.
All right. Those are, the grant money always finds a good use.
Yes.
All right. So Ian's not here. Dan, how are things going over at the county?
Pretty good. Thanks, Frank. Give a few updates here. First off, I see Vinny's listening in, so welcome to you, sir. Congratulations on the job, and we're very excited about having you join the team. So we look forward to getting you started. I know it's going to be March is what I heard, but that's perfectly fine. I know you have some things you need to wrap up over there in Lake Havasu.
Thank
Yesterday,
you, Dan. I appreciate it.
county, yeah, you bet. Yesterday, the county had its annual board kind of budget retreat. We presented kind of all things public works at that. It's a good opportunity just to sit down with our board, of which 3 of the 5 members are all brand new as of January. So some teaching moments for them, kind of enlightening them about CYMPO a little bit and general planning efforts that are done around the county, not just in the CYMPO region. I'd say it went very well, had some good Q&A. Hope everybody's dug out from the snow events. Last week was kind of a headache for us with all that snow, but we've come through without too much trouble. And now we're kind of fixing the damage that was created by it. I know several of us spoke to Cindy Barks. There's an article in the morning paper about potholes. We're all kind of addressing those sorts of things locally and getting things back up to speed. I've got our Williamson Valley Road safety improvement projects ongoing. We just finished a concrete box culvert extension south of the Kelly and O'Neill intersection in preparation for a widening this summer at that location to put in some turn lanes. So that's kind of, I think, phase 3, if I'm not mistaken, of projects we had identified via a Lee engineering study done back in 2017. It's been a while since we've all met. We had our Kirkland Hillside Hot in Place Recycle project last fall that has, that turned out well. I think several of you may have even gone down to visit it and see how things are going and how that process works. We're kind of monitoring that here to see how it performs. Eventually, we'll probably get a chip seal schedule for that just to kind of seal it all up. I've got our spring chip seal and overlay projects on tap. Haven't quite put them out. I guess maybe the chip seal is out for bid right now, but that's, we really kind of held off on a lot of kind of HERF type projects in the fall, just to kind of see if there were going to be revenue impacts relative to the COVID pandemic. And I'm happy to say there really haven't been any major adverse impacts. So money-wise, we're doing okay. We're going to put some projects out and spend down some of that revenue this spring. And then, of course, we've been talking with the town of Prescott Valley about some partnerships that are coming up on the horizon, one of which is working on Prescott East Highway. That road, now that Sunset Lane is done, that road is kind of next on our radar over there. It's quite a rough road. It has a median in the center that has been a maintenance headache for us. So we're probably going to take that median out and put a center turn lane in there that functions a little better for all the accesses along there for residents. And north of Sunset, half of that part of Prescott East is within the town, and we are talking with them about maybe just doing together if we could do an IGA and reach some kind of partnering deal so that the county can oversee construction of that. And then similarly to that, there was some discussion at our politician level and then down at Public Works level as well on some improvements to the intersection at Pronghorn and Antelope Meadows. And I think kind of a right southbound Antelope Meadows onto westbound Pronghorn. So that's something coming out probably in the next fiscal year for that. We're working on our 5-year plan, making updates to that. And when we have that done and submitted to the board, it's probably something that I'll end up sharing to include with our work plan here as well. So that's all I got right now.
Hey, Dan. Well, as long as we're in the Dans, Dan with ADOT, what's going on in the ADOT world?
Hi, everybody. So not too many updates today. I just wanted to mainly remind everyone of the upcoming State Transportation Board member meetings. So we have one on February 19th, March 19th, April 16th and May 21st. The March through May meetings will be the formal public hearings on the next 5-year program, the fiscal year 22 through 26 program. But I also would encourage everyone to consider participating in the February 19th meeting. Arizona did receive a significant stimulus as part of the CARES Act in the amount of almost $182 million with zero match associated with it. And so those funds are intended to offset the loss from the coronavirus impact on the gas sales tax and vehicle sales taxes that generate our revenues. So just wanted to let everyone know of that and to encourage everyone to participate in those board meetings. On a lesser note, if everyone was not aware, John Winnis on my team did retire in December, so I'm in the process of refilling his position. So hopefully we'll have a new regional transportation planner for you, potentially for the next TAC meeting, but if not, for the April TAC meeting. And those are all the updates I have today. Sorry, one more. Also in April, I'll be issuing the call for projects for our ADOT's planning to programming process. This is to start working on the next program, the fiscal year 23 through 27 program. So I'll be issuing a call for projects from CYMPO, as well as our ADOT district and our board members to start taking any new project nominations for us to evaluate for the fiscal year 23 through 27 program. And that's all I have for today.
Mr. Chairman, can I interject real quick? Forgive me. Dan, you mentioned about the, Federal CARES Act, $182 million. Is that coming to Arizona or is that nationwide?
That's to Arizona. Each state received its own stimulus. The amount that Arizona received is currently estimated just under $182 million.
Has ADOT determined yet through FHWA how that's going to be distributed, whether there's money for just local-only projects, or how's that going to be administrated? I mean, I haven't seen anything yet on it, Dan. I was hoping ADOT would have sent something out to the, public agencies.
I have not seen a briefing myself, so unfortunately I don't know how it's going to be distributed. But our current process when we receive federal funds is that it should be following our performance-based planning and programming process by federal and state statute, by federal regulation and state statute. So to the best extent, I would imagine we would follow that. However, if the legislature tells us to identify any specific projects, then that could influence decision-making for that as far as what's proposed to the State Transportation Board. And again, that's why I would encourage everyone to participate in that February 19th board meeting, as well as the other ones I mentioned, March through May. That will be your best opportunity to provide input and influence the updates to the 5-year program.
So, Dan, you haven't gotten anything from the federal government that says, hey, there's $182 million, that's just been verbal? There's no something you could forward on?
I did not have the message that I could forward on at this time, no.
Yeah, I think obviously as the CYMPO, we'd like to take advantage of that, but once again, we don't have any shelved projects, so we're probably looking at a mill and fill or something. So I'll be interested to see how we participate as a TAC to see how we can capture that funding in the CYMPO region. Because I know back in stimulus, about 12 years ago, they actually dedicated a certain amount of funding to CYMPO. So, and that's why I asked the question, do we know how it's going to be distributed? I understand we don't know yet, but got more work to do. But thanks for the update, Dan.
As soon as I do get a formal message from our management, I will distribute that to Allison to share with the TAC. Okay.
Thank you, Dan. All right, I think John has joined us. So, John, do you have any announcements or updates you'd like to provide?
Yeah, I got a couple quick ones. Apologize for the delay. I got a little sidetracked this morning. Couple quick notes of some highlights. The 69 Spring Lane project has been on a winter shutdown while they're waiting for materials. In the spring, we'll get that started up again. And the State Route 69 widening project is getting ready to get started again. We're working on scheduling a business and public meeting for that. That'll be an online meeting. I think they got the funding issues squared away with that project. Up on State Route 89, the Road 1 North project advertised and the bids were opened and they looked pretty good. So we're anticipating that project to be awarded. We just started a project on 89 from Paulden to Hell Canyon to put a resurfacing on the road. It'll be a micro seal. We just had the kickoff meeting for that. So that design is just getting started. Couple other highlights, down on 93, the GAP project north of Wickenburg is still on hold pending funding. And then the second part of that, which is the intersection of 93 and 89, that roundabout project, we're in the process of redesigning that to re-advertise that project for bids. And a couple other notes, I don't know if you guys hit on those. The 89A Robert Road report was getting finalized through CYMPO, and the 69 and 169 concept were getting finalized through CYMPO.
Yep. Yeah, and as long as we're on that note, I think we're going to try and bring those to the TAC, hopefully next meeting, and discuss that and see if the TAC can send that on to the executive board.
Yes.
So, all right. Allison and Daniel, do you all have any announcements for CYMPO? And then I'd also like to introduce Vinny at that time. So.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you, John. So yes, the two ASRs that CYMPO are working on, the 89A Robert Road, we should have a final report next week, and that will definitely be on the March agenda. And then I did receive the 69-169 final report, and I have sent that out to the TAC, and that will also be on the March agenda. But other than that, Allison, do you have any other updates?
No, not at this time.
And then we will provide an update on the ASCT project as well in March.
Okay. And I know you're not officially on board yet, Vinny, but do you mind just maybe giving us an introduction for those few of us that may not be familiar with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you to the TAC, and definitely looking forward to coming back home. So if I haven't had a chance to meet you, Vincent Gallegos, go by Vinny, and born and raised in Prescott, Arizona. And this will be my official third tour of duty with Yavapai County via CYMPO. So I am looking forward to it. The last 3.5 years, I've been the executive director of the Lake Havasu Metropolitan Planning Organization. Prior to that, I was the CYMPO transportation planner. And then in the mid-90s to mid-2000s, I did work for Yavapai County Planning and Zoning at the time, which is now Development Services. So with all that said, I am looking forward to it. Appreciate the executive board really working with my 6-week notice to my current employer. So I have a contract, and Havasu would have worked with me no matter what, but I did want to leave them in a good situation. As you're reviewing today, the work program and the TIP, we're in that same season, we're in that same cycle, and in Havasu, we're a staff of 2 people versus CYMPO with a staff of 3 people. My assistant's relatively new. She's been on the job for about 5 months, so I think it'll definitely help me to leave the organization as best I can. So I appreciate that indulgence, and with the chair's permission, I will offer a few more comments in the work program. Understanding I'm not official yet, but just wanted to put some comments on the table for the tax thought, and then once I get on board, we can officially pick them up. So I appreciate the time.
Okay, thanks. And I know everyone misses Chris, but we're happy to see you again. So, and I don't have a problem with the comments on the upcoming agenda items. I'm sure probably most of the other TAC appreciates as much input as we can get. So, considering the circumstances, I feel it'd be appropriate. All right. Anybody else I'm missing? Okay. With that, let's move on to discussion and review of the FY 22-23 Draft Unified Planning Work Program. And I guess I'll just open it up. I have no comments on this at this time, but I'm sure others might. So we just open it up and maybe someone speak up, and we'll go from there and make sure everybody gets heard at some point.
Mr. Chair, I can touch on a few points that we have added.
I'm sorry, Allison. We even discussed this, but yeah, go ahead, and Allison and Daniel have a few highlights they want to go over first, and then we'll go into discussion. Sorry about that.
No problem. So Daniel and I worked on creating this draft for you today. A lot is similar to the previous work program. Just a few changes that I'd like to point out briefly here. The first being on page 12, there's a new funding source called Consolidated Planning Grants. Let me see if I can share my screen here. This is a fairly new grant to us. We've been made aware from ADOT that this fund source will combine two of our previous fund sources, PL and 5305D. And this fund source will be subject to a 5.7 match rate. So what we've done throughout the work program is combined the PL and 5305D into one fund source called CPG, Consolidated Planning Grant. So we'll be collecting more information on that from ADOT as time progresses. You'll notice on page 14, we will update the carry forward amounts once we know what those are closer to the end of the fiscal year, May and June. And then as you go through the work program, you'll notice on the budget tables, we've added a line this year showing the that we're obligating only the obligation authority amount rather than our full apportionment. Our apportionment would be 100% of the funds. Our obligation authority would be 94.9% of our funds. So we're removing that 5.1% and adding a line here that you'll see for the reduction. We've done that with all of our budget tables.
Mr. Chairman, can I jump in? Allison, can we go back to, would you like comments at the end or as we go along?
I think if I can just touch on the few points I had, then we can open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. We did add a little place mark here under the regional planning projects. And I believe Vinny will touch on this. Vinny, I wasn't sure if you wanted to do that now or during the tip item.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I can actually do a little bit of both. So yeah, I definitely want to respect the technicality of me not officially starting, but I do appreciate the chair and the TAC indulging me today to begin this discussion. And the reason why I'm doing it is I do feel if we move forward, there's a bit of a timeline we're up against here. And this program, I think some of you might have some familiarity with it, but I know CYMPO hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, participated too actively in the HSIP program. We do have some, and it's Highway Safety Improvement Program. I believe ADOT does have a project coming up in a few years for HSIP, but I will tell you, this is something in the Havasu MPO region we have participated in. I know the other MPOs and COGs have, and this is a real opportunity, and I'm just going to give you a relatively short example today, and then I'm happy to follow up if we can do it either in this meeting or if there's any individual agencies that want to talk more about it, we can. But what we've done in Havasu as an example is we have brought in a consultant to do two things. During this season, it would probably be starting around mid-March, early April. And what they would do is they would do crash data analysis for the last 5 years. in preparation, and this again is working with you as the TAC and then the CYMPO staff, they would look at the crash data for the last 5 years, make sure that's accurate, current, and provide that to you as a TAC. And through those discussions would identify HSIP projects. And if some of you have been around for a while, you'll remember that CYMPO used to be apportioned HSIP projects. And then a few years ago, they changed that direct receiving of or providing to the MPO to a competitive grant, kind of a philosophical change, seeing some greater needs throughout Arizona. When that became competitive, you know, it was then up to the MPOs and COGs to decide how they wanted to compete for that. Some of us in Arizona, again, brought on a consultant. The last 3 call for projects, that's what we've done. You know, these numbers are the numbers we use. They'll be relatively close for CYMPO, but for, you know, around $20,000 for a consultant to do crash data analysis and also provide HSIP applications, we've been awarded on average annually around $1 million. So again, forgive the simplicity, but sometimes that's how I like to put it out there, is that for about $20,000 a year, we're getting about $1 million back. HSIP runs anywhere from around 94%, 95% to 100%. So, you know, I know we have a traffic signal that's going to be covered around 100%, so no local match. We've done a pedestrian crossing a hawk in Havasu. I believe that's around a 5% match. So we have a variety of projects. Again, we'll have a little more time to really dive into the technicalities of the HSIP program. But again, you really want to look at benefit cost ratio. Biggest driver is fatalities. Obviously, all crashes will be factored in. There's a whole list of safety countermeasures. And as I've been going through the work program and the TIP and looking at projects that you all have been identifying and have penciled in, you know, it does beg the question what some HSIP projects could do for the region and tie into existing projects. So, you know, I've already talked with Allison and Daniel to pick their brain on some of these projects, and I've also gone ahead and pulled up the crash data from the last 5 years, and you know, looking at the fatalities throughout the region, you know, before we move forward, it's relatively easy to see that some real HSIP projects could support existing projects for future years. I know Dan Gabbio's on the TAC, and he can chime in on the HSIP program, but this is going to be the call for projects, I believe 24, 25 fiscal year. So the timeline we're looking at, I believe ADOT will do the call for projects this summer around, I think it's June 1st or July 1st, right in there. But the work that needs to be done prior to that is with the TAC and the staff. Again, ideally, a consultant, someone who's working in this area. I know CYMPO has worked to create the on-call list, which will make life a little bit easier, but staff would still have kind of our backs up against this timeline when this call for projects comes on. So I was a little concerned holding off on this conversation until I start, because I think if Allison and Daniel, with your general support, could go ahead and do the necessary research and bring back all the details you would need as a TAC. But my encouragement is 2 things here, is that we go ahead obviously and identify it for future years, which is what we're looking at in the work program and the TIP. So by all means, we would participate in this HSIP program, bringing in a little more help to secure that. But then the other part of this conversation is that we also look to go ahead and do this activity now and this year. And again, that's where I would like to ask, you know, the TAC for some discussion questions. and then some general guidance to staff to bring back any questions you may have. But this is a very beneficial program to the state of Arizona, and I think we can be very innovative as an MPO to leverage what we already have and what we're looking at with this program. So I know there's probably a greater complexity, but I just wanted to at least introduce the idea and start the discussion today. And Dan, Gabio, if you had anything that I either missed on that would help the discussion today, maybe you might be someone to chime in. And with that said, I'll be happy to take any questions or comments.
I don't have anything to add, Vinny. I think you explained it very well. It's a good opportunity. So I would certainly support the idea.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple things to add.
Sure. I just want to make sure, Allison, is this a point where have you got more to go over in this?
No, I think this is a fine time to talk about HSIP.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I would, if it's on the same subject, Dan, we'll go ahead and handle this now, and then I'd like to get back to Norm once we're done with the HSIP comment portion.
I'm fine talking about HSIP now if you like, or I can defer to Norm first if you prefer.
Norm, if you're okay with that, I know you had asked a question earlier. Are you okay with discussing HSIP right now and then going back to other comments?
Absolutely, Frank. I'm good with it because I got comments on HSIP too. That's a great program. We've done some good stuff. I'd like to comment after Dan gets done.
All right. Perfect. And I'm a little familiar with it too. So Dan, go ahead if you would.
Sure. So we at the county have a couple HSIP programs in the pipeline right now. In fact, we just got one started over in the Verde Valley. That was some work we're doing the Cornville Road. The application was made for that through NACOG actually, and they had done a study, and I think Burgess and Nyepel assisted with the application on that. We had quite a few crossover type accidents and whatnot on Cornville Road, as well as some roadway departure accidents. And so we worked on, actually I should say Burgess and Nyepel did the lion's share of the work. We provided some feedback and a little bit of guidance on it, and they applied for it, and we have landed $4.2 million for some not only shoulder improvements, but also we're putting in some center line rumble strips for some mitigation measures on that. It is we just completed the IGA for that. It is all being run through ADOT, which I understand is fairly standard for a local government such as us. So Jacobs is going to be doing the design on it, and we will move forward with construction designs within the next 12 months, I'd say. Then moving forward with the construction after that. We're really excited about it, and I can't say enough good things about that program. We have utilized it in a couple other places as well. And then the other one that we've got, which is I think a year or two out, is up on old Route 66, where we have an intersection at Fort Rock Road, I believe, where we had some bad accident history there. We're going to do some improvements to that, just to kind of bring the intersection up to snuff, so to speak, and along with some pre-warnings and whatnot. And it's not nearly as large of a project as our Cornville Road one, but the program is just a fantastic opportunity. If you find that in your jurisdiction you're running into something that has a fair amount of either fatal or incapacitating injuries, it is a nice way to help address that. And I completely agree with going the consultant route for putting together an application. I think it's a nice opportunity. It makes you more competitive and gets, for a small amount of money, some heavy lifting done for the application. So that's just my experience with it. I thought that was relevant.
And Mr. Chair, if I can follow up with just a comment to Dan's example. Yeah, that's exactly, I appreciate Dan adding the specifics to Yavapai County. But exactly for what we've done in Havasu, is the last couple of years, we've worked with Greenlight Traffic Engineering, Mike Blankenship and his team. Again, he's crunched the data. He comes to the TAC. He allows, it's always a great discussion because as an expert, he's able to throw out a lot of ideas, but it's the TAC that really chews on it. And if you will, kind of narrows it down. Then we go on to that next step, as Dan mentioned, in that HSIP application, some of these consultants are just working on it day in and day out. So they really do have the expertise of what makes the best application. And they then bring those applications back. The application, the MPO, again, is paying the consultant to prepare the application, but then we turn it over to finally to the local public agency. In our case would be Lake Havasu City. It's their project, they'll sign off on it, but it's a really great partnership between the MPO, the local public agency, and again has been successful, at least for us, to the tune of an additional $1 million a year. That's pretty valuable to the region when we have such limited resources. But Dan really gave some good examples of how I would envision it working for our region also. Thank you.
Of course, ADOT has been chasing this money for quite some time, and they have had a lot of success within CYMPO as well. So, we are, fighting our own member agency there a little bit to some degree, but these tend to happen on higher speed roads. So there may be cases in which I don't want to duplicate efforts if ADOT's already aware of them and chasing HSIP money on them. So just keep it in mind, and maybe I'd love to hear from John Latier on that if he has an opinion in that respect. So.
Okay, thanks. I'll go to promise Norm, so I'll go to Norm first, and then we can maybe pick up John if he's got comments on that.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Hey, to cap on what Dan, thank you. To cap what Dan and Vinny has commented on, congratulations to you, because we've had frustrations here at the CYMPO. We invest so much in our transportation network, it's so safe. Every one of our applications ever met the cost-benefit ratio, I think Vinny touched upon. So as you can see, Dan was successful outside of the CYMPO region with high-speed roads because they don't invest in transportation like we do locally. So I always like to stump for, our transportation taxes that we put into the system with ADOT. We do one every year, but we never reach the cost-benefit ratio. So that's been a frustration. So I guess my question would be, with a new funding source, or updated, I guess, we were real successful. I go back many years. I remember you well, Vinny. You might recall we used 4 years of funding of HSIP for our sign upgrades. I know for Prescott Valley that was mega huge for us. We got all of our reflectivity new signs, and we spent about $1.5 million on upgrading signs. So it was a little different effort because it wasn't a dead man's curve we were solving, but very much dedicated to safety. I might say I lament a little bit. The Road 1 North signal just got awarded. That didn't even meet the cost-benefit ratio. So once again, we weren't able to use HSIP, and I understood that was a safety issue, and that's why that project moved ahead. So I guess my comment is, here locally, we haven't been successful with capturing HSIP, even though they're safety projects. And I understand the competition level, statewide. But did want to comment too, the TAC may recall, Burgess and IPO did do the same similar safety study. I think it was statewide they did an effort. But I remember sitting through the presentations, Vince, I think you were actually on the CYMPO staff, that they had a neat little computer program that you could input all the data they needed to compete HSIP. And, that's still in place. So I'm sure Dana Biscan would be more than happy to, give us an update on how we can capture, put input in the data. And I agree, it's nice to use a consultant because it makes your application that much more competitive. But I guess my last comment would be, I would prefer the money come directly to CYMPO. That's where we lost funding. That's why we haven't had a project here in CYMPO for about the last 4 or 5 years, is because, we don't meet the cost benefit ratios. But I would prefer that we pay into it, and that we would be able to have the money come locally like it did before, and we can make our own local determinations. So maybe we could have put HSIP towards that Road 1 North signal on 89. In addition, Dan, I hear on Williamson Valley Road, that's a safety project, and you weren't able to capture any funding there for a regional road. So I know here in Prescott Valley, we've been, the fatalities at 89 and Robert's been a concern, but we never meet the cost-benefit ratio. So we have plenty of fatalities, just, difficult to solve it for the size of the project and money we have funded. So I would prefer that money come locally to CYMPO, and we're able to make our own determinations here rather than compete on a statewide level, because as we mentioned, we kind of lose out since we spend so much of our local money on the transportation system here. That's the end of my comments, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. And yeah, you reminded me, going back to my days in Kingman, we actually used HSIP money before it went statewide for our sign inventory and upgrade systems when you could do a network-wide HSIP project. But when they went to statewide competition, that kind of went out the window, and it's based on those, like you said, those fatalities it's sad to say that fatalities are the key to getting the funding, but when you look at cost-benefit ratios, that really jumps it up there. I know, as Dan mentioned, ADOT's got some HSIP projects going on up here in the Chino region, Little Ranch Road, some of the Del Rio Rumble Strip projects. Those are all HSIP projects that they competed for and got. And again, when I was with WACOG, Greenlight had worked there right before I left and actually completed the study. I left right when they were doing the call to projects in 17. But I think they got a good amount of funding out of that work that Mike and those folks did. So I think it's good. I'm a little worried about the short time frame, though, trying to get that done for the call to projects. So I think my opinion would be anything we do, it really needs to push through quickly to meet that call for projects. But in the end, even if you don't meet this year's, it's great to have it for next year's, because you can use this sort of study for multiple years. And I think Vinny would agree that it's not just a one-year thing. You kind of build on it and use it for multiple years. John, do you have any comments maybe from the ADOT perspective on that? I know Dan had mentioned you might, so.
Well, just in general, I appreciate the discussion. And as you were talking, I was trying to see if I could put my fingers here on the last round of awards. I probably we'll need a little more time to get that summarized, but I do recall from the last set of projects that were awarded, there was a high percentage, and you're right, the competition was, it was tight competition statewide, and there was a large percentage of projects that were given to projects outside ADOT, so non-ADOT highways. So I was going to try to see if I could get that data for you here real quick, but I can't put my fingers on it right now. I can try to get a better summary for our next meeting.
Oh, sure. And I'll just add too, in my experience in Kingman with the lower speeds, most of the projects we were looking in there involved vehicle pedestrian conflicts, because that's where you had the more injuries. So in your urban areas where you've got lower speeds, start looking at those bike and pedestrian type accidents, because that's where the injury level goes way up, because cars are so safe nowadays. When you have cars smacking each other at 25 miles an hour, it's luckily not as severe of an injury. So that's a good thing to not have those injuries. But when you're looking at the competition, it's the more severe injuries, and that's usually in urban areas or higher traffic areas. That's where you have those pedestrian conflicts.
Frank, before we move on, could I interject one last comment? HSP, I see where in the work plan we don't have any money put in any box there, and I understand our next TAC meeting we really need to move forward to make a decision toward getting it to the 95% level. So I guess I'd like to task Vinny, when he gets on board, or, you know, simple staff, is that amount coming directly to CYMPO, and what is that amount we could anticipate? Because right now it's blank. And as you see, they want a call for projects as early as what, May or June? So I'd like to think maybe Dan Gabbio could help us to say, hey, do we know what that funding is? And does it come directly to CYMPO? And then we can help frame what we could think about for projects in the coming months to maybe get a jump start.
Norm, just to confirm, the HSIP funds won't be allocated directly to CYMPO. It'll be statewide competitive.
But it's an agenda item to what, to want to compete? So it hasn't changed then, so why are we adding it to the work plan? Is that what FHWA wanted?
Well, if I can, Mr. Chair, and to address Norm's comment. So a little bit of, again, the example that we're doing in Havasu. So yes, it's competitive. So again, the MPO does the crash data analysis through a consultant. They put together the HSIP applications. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Norm, we would, what we've done, at least in Havasu, is then when that application's done, again, with the consultant through the TAC, we turn that application over to Lake Havasu City for their public works director's signature. We continue to work together as a team, but technically that project then is awarded to Lake Havasu City, would remain a federal project. We would keep it on the MPO tip. So the money does come to the region, and I guess the technicality of it, again, is it's not coming to the MPO, but the MPO, maybe a little bit to Dan's point, I know he was mentioning the consultants, but in this case, it would be the MPO and the consultants doing some of the heavy lifting to get the region in the position to be competitive. And we would approach it, Norm, from the conversation again. Ultimately, it's the local public agency that's signing off on that HSIP application, but because we're facilitating the conversation, we're going to be looking at existing projects we have now projected in the work program and the TIP, and see if we can't tie it all together. So I feel maybe we're running into a few technicalities, but I would say we're meeting the spirit of what you're talking about, Norm, but there's a few specifics that don't allow it to be kind of what you would like it to be, where it just comes to the MPO region, if you will.
And I guess I'd still like to see numbers put in there. If it costs about $20,000 for an application, I'm sure all its member agencies as TAC members can come up with safety projects, but I'd like to see some box filled that actually in our work plan says this is the money we want to spend. So, you know, I don't know, would we want to put 3 projects in there maybe, or 2, and actually put $20,000 per project in there, so that when we get audited, the money's actually, you know, HSIP money should be used to fund this. Or I don't know our funding source to spend the $20,000, or if that needs to be sponsored by the local public agency if they have a safety project. I'd like to dialogue about that, you know, for the work plan.
And Mr. Chair and Norm, if I can, I think if I hear the conversation okay, then with what I'm hearing today, and I think we have a general consensus for staff to do what Norm's asking. And I wanted to make sure before we brought those numbers today that there was support for it. I'm hearing support for it. And at the next TAC meeting, staff would then do exactly what Norm's talking about. We would basically fill in those budget table boxes, but I didn't necessarily want Allison and Daniel to do that today if there wasn't a real interest in that. So if it's okay, Mr. Chair, we'll bring that to the next TAC meeting.
Sure, and I think hang on real quick. Let me just make sure. My understanding is that what we need to do first is try and get a consultant on board to develop that list of projects. So we don't, I understand Norm's point that a lot of us know where our safety issues are, but just to go back in the process we went through in WACOG, what we did is we brought the consultant on board and they developed analyzed the data and developed, I'll just use the word heat maps for for where the areas were of concern, brought that, and then in this case, it'd be the CYMPO. We would discuss maybe where it'd be best for the consultant to develop some applications for the individual agencies. And what it does is it pools those resources rather than each agency doing their own safety study. It's the CYMPO region combining resources for that document to then build off of for the individual applications. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Chair. So exactly, what we would bring to the next TAC meeting is the funding source to be able to bring in a consultant. Then be sure that you all are on board and supportive of where that funding's coming from for a consultant. We could do some very tentative conversation of potential projects in-house, but to your point, Frank, I absolutely agree. That would be the whole purpose of the consultant, is to really have a very technical dialogue with you all and staff, and over the next couple months, really go back and forth and try and narrow down what projects are going to be best given the situation. So step one is to identify the funds for a consultant. Step two is to get them on board. And then step three is to identify those projects. A little bit to Norm's point, I think we can do a little bit of in-house conversation to identify some projects. I would hesitate against doing too much. Again, that's what we're paying the expert to really do. So I am hoping we can hit on all the points that I've heard today. I don't see any issues from a staff standpoint.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I might suggest, Vinny, we take a look at that Burgess and Nipole safety study. We paid a lot of money for that, and obviously we haven't delivered any project out of that. I would resurrect that as really part of the scope to say, look at those projects were recommended in that study. And I don't know if that's changed much in 5 years, but we've already got the list of projects, if I'm not mistaken. I might suggest we look back in the CYMPO archives and find that Burgess and Nipole safety study that I know Dana Biscan led that effort. So it should be already be shelved.
Mr. Chair and Norm, I would, again, that could be some of the in-house work. I think if I could, Norm, I think the additional benefit, by no means does it take away your suggestion, and staff can begin by looking at that. Part of bringing in a consultant will look at the most current 5-year data. So, well, it may not be too dramatic change. We're going to get what we need from the Dana Biscan, Burgess and Nipole study you're referring to. That's going to be very valuable. But what's going to be a little bit where it's going to tweak it is the current 5-year crash data. So what we would want to do is we would want that, it's twofold that the consultant's doing, is 5-year crash data analysis, most current 5-year, and then the HSIP application. So that current 5 years really a big part of it. So I'm not in any way opposed to your suggestion, Norm. I would say staff begin with exactly what you're saying, but if we're going to be addressing what we need to be, we'll need to do some crash data analysis. So I'm in agreement.
I would like to chime in a little and say exactly the same thing. The very first thing you look at is crash data. I mean, this is why we haven't chased any HSIP money for our Williamson Valley Road projects, is we don't have the crash data to support it. It's, maybe there's some, rear end type things, but no incapacitating injuries or anything like that. So we're trying to stay ahead of the curve before people die. That's our idea on the Williamson Valley Road projects. But if there's a pattern that shows up in the crash data of, in the last 5 years, again, and it's important to stay on these things. If you have, some known accident history in year 4 or 5, now's the time to look at it, and now's the time to apply for money for it, because if things have changed, once those drop off that last 5 years, you've lost a window of opportunity, so to speak. Just to reiterate what Vinny's saying is the crash data is the very first thing you look at, and then if things show up in some kind of pattern, then you go to the safety studies and whatnot and recommendations from that. And then of course there's a laundry list of mitigation avenues for how to resolve certain types of recurring accidents. So.
And Mr. Chair, and to Dan's comment, if I can add, I don't have any official word on this, Dan, but last we've been updated on this program is they are, and you just triggered my mind when you said to get ahead of the curve. So up till now, we have been working on historical crash data for the HSIP program. Rumor is to us, again, unofficially, that they are looking to move to a predictive crash modeling program. And again, it's being suggested that this next call for projects will go ahead and bring in some predictive modeling, which is exactly what Dan's talking about, again, to be proactive. It's been very frustrating for all of us to have to respond to the fatalities after the fact. And if they do change that, I would just add this one last comment. That becomes a bit of a game changer, but more than that, where that consultant expert will be so critical to bring in technology that can guide us with some of that predictive crash data modeling. So if they in fact do what I'm hearing they're going to do, we do have a chance to be a little more proactive and for a region, look at projects that we haven't looked at in the past. Again, by no means is that the official word, but it's been alluded to quite a bit at this point.
Right,
Yeah,
and Vinny,
Very good.
if I could real quick, Vinny, I think, wasn't that used, is Golden Shores over by Havasu? Are you familiar with that project? I think maybe Mojave County used some of that for their funding for that project.
I believe so, Dan, yes.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, so someone else I think was...
With regards to predictive modeling is it may lean towards, the real high traffic volumes where you have the higher possibility of accidents. Is it a rate or is it just sheer numbers in predictive modeling? So, my concern, I know of a couple in the Verde Valley that are probably perfect candidates for predictive modeling. They just don't have the quite the number of fatalities yet, but you can see as the Verde Valley grows that it's going to go that way. But both of them are on, ADOT highways. And I think, one's on the interstate, the other's on I think 89A. And, we've all kind of seen the number of accidents building up. And I think there's been some opportunities to try to look at ADOT chasing that money. And we've even offered to help partner on that if it might help bring these things to the top of the pile. But I definitely, that's good to hear, Vinny. I see that as definitely a game changer because we are, anytime we have a fatality, it's like, well, the first thing we do internally is, do we have add that one to the database? Is it something that we need to be looking at for future HSIP? And I hate doing that. All right, sorry.
Well, that's okay. Anybody else with comments on the HSIP? Okay, I believe, Norm, you might have had some other comments you wanted to go over.
Frank, just two quick ones. Backing up, so help me, we've looked at the draft. Are we going to talk again at March, or do we need to approve it at the March TAC meeting for the complete work plan? Allison, can you help me with that?
Sure. So we will be holding a March meeting again for the TAC to look at the updated draft that we have modified based on any suggestions today. The March meeting will also be especially advertised for public comment. And then in April, we will be seeking TAC recommendation to approve and then board approval.
So we need to get to the 95% level, and I might agree we're almost there anyway today, in my opinion. So good. I'll look forward to basically sent out for public comment, which is what I recall from history in March. If we're done with that comment, my next comment, just a real quick one. Allison, back on page 12, we talked about the new consolidated planning grant.
Yes.
Just real quick, I wasn't familiar with 5305 funding. Is that a new funding source too, or we just never captured that?
That was our 5305D transit planning funding, and we have captured it in previous years. Currently, we have an agreement with NACOG where we are providing that funding to them in exchange for transit planning on a county-wide basis.
So are we taking that funding from him now, is what I'm reading it? Because I wasn't familiar with that. I didn't realize we gave it to him, and that's okay too. But so we're going to combine that now and take that funding. And if we are, have we notified NACOG of that?
So we haven't met with NACOG on this yet. Our agreement is kind of self-renewing until parties wish to cancel. So I'm sure that'll be something that we meet with them on in the near future.
They still have that study going on, don't they?
Daniel, do you know if they're still working on that study?
Something tells me, I think Roger in our office has been periodically a part of that committee that's working with a consultant on that. So
Yes, I believe they're still working on it.
okay.
My understanding is January 1st, they're supposed to have the final draft, but I haven't seen it yet.
And Frank, if I can make a comment, Allison, could you scroll to your spreadsheet, the next page that shows this? So just to help out Norm and the rest of the TAC a little bit. So and this is again happening across Arizona for all the MPOs and COGs. So we've put together the same thing to present to our TAC and our executive board. So yeah, Norm, you might not have familiarity, but the MPO has actually been receiving this particular funding since day one. It is provided through the Federal Transit Administration 5305D, D as in David. We've used it in the past for anything mobility management, transit related. As Allison mentioned today, it is going to partnership with NACOG. We can have a discussion at the next meeting. My plan isn't necessary. My plan is to keep doing what's working, and this is working. So we would continue to honor that agreement with NACOG at this point. I don't see to change that. What Allison and Daniel are illustrating to you today is the opportunity to consolidate two existing colors of money. The benefit to CYMPO in this case is the match. The match on the 5305D is 20%. The match on PL funds is 5.7%. By allowing the consolidation of the two, the feds are telling us that we can go with the lower match. So now that 5305D is at a 5.7% match norm. So long story short, we would continue business as usual. The benefit to the MPO is we're not having to pay out as much match. So there's a bit of a cost saving. So in the end, I know I'm not seeing the number right offhand for CYMPO, but as an example in Havasu, it's going to save us around $10,000. So we would basically take that 10,000 match savings and put it back in the program. CYMPO would do the same thing. You know, it'll probably be around 20,000. So long story short, Norm, that money just goes back to being able to program you know, that additional cost savings. Ironically, I didn't think about it till I'm saying it now, is we're looking for 20,000 for the HSIP consultant. So it just kind of worked itself out, if you will, that we freed up some match and we now are able to pay for the consultant moving forward. So that's how it would work.
If I could cap onto that, Vinny, I guess my comment is, I think the human services plan that we do, I think it's a valuable document that CYMPO does produce. I'd like to see it mentioned in the body of the comments here so that any public looking at it or our human service providers that do transit could see that that's a funding source. Once again, we're always competing for funding. I kind of like when it's compartmentalized. If our planning level dollars we've used typically to fund the staff here at CYMPO. So that would be good to demonstrate that. But if there's monies and dollars available that used to be captured by NACOG for studies, I'd like to make sure we continue to do those studies, because whereas a lot of our member agencies haven't been supportive of, moving forward with funding transit, Prescott Valley has here recently. So I'd like to be able to have that mentioned before it's gobbled up for other means. But I think those are good documents. I want to make sure that if it is supported and funded, that if it's not going to be a focus of the board to make their determinations that they want to fund the transit studies, then that needs to be, borne out, because I think there were good documents that get used that even though we chose not to fund them as elected bodies, there's still lots of other providers out there that are able to use that data. And I think it's a good funding source, because transit is something that, how we're not funded by member agencies, only by Prescott Valley. It'd be nice to make sure those studies are made available for those human service providers, because I'd hate to see that funding taken from them right now in those studies.
Mr. Chair and Norm, if I can, absolutely. And Norm, you've always been a big advocate for that. I know a champion for that particular document, and we do invest staff time and dollars to really make that document. So I'm glad you always keep it as part of the discussion, and it really doesn't gather dust with you. That's how it should be. With that said, Norm, we would still, as an MPO, we're still going to be federally required to continue to generate that document and to update that document. So it's still a responsibility of the MPO. A little bit to Norm's point, I think if I was understanding it right, and this is definitely a concern, while there are many benefits to this consolidated new funding source, there is a potential, because now we're taking transit funds and combining them with federal highways, that transit could get a bit eclipsed in this conversation. And again, if I'm taking Norm's point a little further, we do need to be careful, and I'll do this as the director or the administrator of the MPO, to continue to highlight what Norm said, because we do have federal highway projects that can use these dollars. It will be my staff role to really ensure that we're continuing to honor our transit mobility related projects. And with this consolidation, that could easily happen, that we start to drift away from some of our transit responsibilities and even opportunities. So with that said, Norm, I think we can do as staff with what you said and be able to highlight what you mentioned.
And thank you, Vinny. I would put that right in the body. And tell you the truth, I don't have my file here, but we haven't done the human service provider update in a number of years. I might suggest we look into that as CYMPO staff, to say if we need to commit some funding to that, to update the document, because it is used by the human service providers very much. We get overshadowed too much at the at times of roadway planning, but it is a function of CYMPO. Those federal dollars do come specifically for transit, and the human service providers do utilize that human service providers, I call it the yellow pages, so to speak, of what's out there for services. So I might mention, put that right in there and explore the fact if we need to update that document in the coming year.
Okay, thank you, Norm. Any other comments on the work program? Okay, so I think, Allison, if we can, and staff, work through these and make the additions and bring that back for the next meeting along with the public comment portion. And then we'll go from there with the addition of trying to move forward as timely as possible with maybe bringing the TAC, something on the consultant, trying to get that study to see if the TAC wants to move forward with that, because that's, at least in my mind, that's a serious time crunch if the call for projects is June. So.
Frank, if I could, sounds like we're getting ready to wrap up. I guess I would just want, one of our priorities back in October was, and I think we've touched upon it, was the dual turn lane 89, 89A. I would understand that document. Could that be distributed before the next TAC meeting in the next couple of weeks? If it was that close that ADOT did look at it. So I'd like to have a look at it, maybe a week or two in advance of our next TAC meeting to say, yes, let's, have an agenda item, say we need to move forward with that ASR document because it's in this year's work plan and there's money sitting there. I would prefer at the next March meeting, if the rest of the TAC agrees, to say, yeah, let's vote on saying, let's send the RFP out and get a consultant on board, if that's okay with the rest of the TAC. To get that in advance so we can vote on it next meeting. That's my comment.
Sure, thank you, Norm, and that's, yeah. In addition, we'll look at the 69, 169 roundabout, the Robert Road, the adaptive signals, and then the 89, 89A. So I'd like to see what we can get on those in the next meeting. If it ties in with the work program, great. If not, maybe separate those agenda items as we need to.
And
how's
Mr.
that
Chair,
sound?
we will be touching on the dual on-ramps project as part of the MTIP item coming up next.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the work program? All right, with that, I'll move forward to the discussion and review of the 22 to 26 Metropolitan Improvement Program, the MTIP. Allison, you and Daniel want to give us some highlights of that and then move into discussion?
Sure, we'll kind of tag team this here. So yeah, Daniel and I created this draft for you today. Really the goal we had behind this document was to keep in mind that the purpose of this is for public consumption. We tried to make sure it was easily understood by the public as possible. We did add an appendices for acronyms not previously included in previous years. A lot of this is similar to the previous Word document of the MTIP. Chapter 4, performance measures. One change we did add and that we're suggesting is to indicate that CYMPO will adopt ADOT's performance measures in perpetuity rather than updating them each time they change. Then we get into the federally funded projects, and we have revamped this spreadsheet quite a bit from last year. Again, with the goal to just make it very easily readable. We've taken it from 5 pages to 2 pages, and we feel that it's easily read and would be for the public as well. If I could just mention some of these highlighted items, you'll notice this SR 69 Willow Creek Road, Glassford Hill Road, adaptive signal planning. I went ahead and projected what we would potentially be spending in FY22 for that project. It is scheduled to be completed in April of 22. So just ran some numbers, and this is a little bit inflated what we could be expecting to spend in FY22 funds that were actually FY21 that we would be carrying forward into 22. The next project is the dual on-ramps project, and we added it here kind of as a placekeeper just so that we could talk about it. This project was programmed in FY21 with $75,000 of SPR funding. Since then, we have been made aware by ADOT Finance of a deficit that is appearing on our ADOT ledger in the amount of roughly $53,000. So our intent is to meet with ADOT Finance once Vinny is with us, and we can all discuss and hopefully get a better understanding of why that's there. Our initial thought is it could be due to, in previous years, having fully obligated our apportioned funds as opposed to only our obligation authority. That's our first thought, but we do need to meet with ADOT Finance on that. So there's a potential that we will need to repay that $53,000, and we saw that project being a potential option, taking some funding there to repay that deficit. But just wanted to bring that information to you today and let you know that we are working on that and trying to, I guess, solidify where that's coming from, and that the $53,000 is the actual amount we will need to repay. And then just to get through this real quick, and then we can open up for questions. Jenny touched on the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Funds are yet to be determined on that. And then I just added a couple boxes here for the tax purposes to see the funds that we have yet to program in FY24, I'm sorry, FY25 and 26. We have programmed projects in 22 through 24 based on a previous working group session. So you can see here the funding that we have remaining there. And then this last table here is the projects that fall within the CYMPO boundary that are in the ADOT improvement program. So I will pause there and open up for questions or comments.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments they want to go over?
Frank, if I could, every year as a TAC committee, we look at the 600,000 of the STBG funding. So I think it's incumbent upon us. I'm looking at, you know, the adaptive signal study I thought was a different funding source, but typically every year we look to spend that 600,000 obligated for planning. So I guess I just want to throw it out there. Sans the 53,000, that doesn't, you know, that figures in, but I guess as a TAC, what are we proposing? It looks like we're proposing the Great Western we've talked about as a TAC here 6 months ago for next year's, you know, focus to move forward with a planning study. Is that what I'm seeing? And if I'm looking at those numbers, we're fall short. So it's just more of a, you know, question to the TAC for discussion. We know we're finishing these current studies and they're in play. Good stuff. What do we put into place so March we can say we're 95% the way there? What are we doing?
Anybody have any response to that? I'm still struggling to figure some of this out, so.
Mr. Chair and Norm, if I could just offer one comment, is a general comment and a specific to Norm's point, if I can. I did look over the whole proposed work program and TIP, and I met with Allison and Daniel, and just really I want to commend both of them as staff. You know, just really applaud you. It's a big task, even with a director, either Chris before with me coming in to put this together. So really good job, team. Awesome job. To Norm's point, I hope I'm not sure if you are seeing it, Norm, but STBG funds are currently identified for a couple things. The things you've listed, but you didn't mention, it is currently where it says CYMPO administration and operation. So 245,000 STBG, and Allison just kind of scrolled back up. So if you look right now, your STBG as it stands is fully programmed out. If I'm understanding your comment, Norm, or kind of a little bit of a question. So as far as FY22 goes, STBG is pretty much taken care of because of CYMPO administration operation, the adaptive signal planning, Great Western Corridor. So you're pretty good on 22 if I was understanding your comment right, Norm.
And I guess to the point, I didn't notice because this is the first year I think we've taken that much from STBDG. I know the planning level has got the new term. I don't see that CPG. So I didn't realize we used that much to operate CYMPO in the tune of 350,000. I thought it was only about 150,000 operate CYMPO. I wasn't aware of that we needed that much STBG. Is that new this year, Allison?
No, that's not new this year. That's how we had it split in years prior as well.
Okay.
Norm, this is Dan Gabbio. Just to get back to your comment, to clarify your comment on the Great Western study, were you supporting that or supporting a different initiative in place of that? Could you please clarify?
As a TAC, we talked 6 months ago. That was our next priority, I thought. So yes, we discussed that, and I thought we agreed as a TAC. Anyone else recall that?
I recall that too, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the county even parked a little money. It's maybe a year, 3 or 4 out in our 5-year plan, but we've got a little money parked out there relative to Great Western in case there would be a possibility of some right-of-way acquisition or something like that. It's so far out, it's hard to say that it's going to stay put, and it's up to our board, but we've proposed that so that if this study were to move forward and there were some identifications of maybe some areas to acquire right-of-way, that we would have a little regional road money to utilize and tap into. So just for the edification of the group.
And Dan, if I recall our conversation here, it's been 6 months ago, but what we're concerned with, I think, we're well aware in the unincorporated area up there, we're having whole sections being taken down, 4 of them that I'm aware of that have come to the planning. So what we talked about was whatever goes up there, whether it's particularly, subdivided in subdivisions and annexed or, lot split, a regional road is needed up there for, that significant land divisions going on. I was hoping what this, we had tasked with the fact of, I understood there was a study somewhere that ADOT recently did that was similar down in the valley to where the scope was, we need to identify, the corridor has been identified. We need to really do a scope to say, how can we start writing legal descriptions to say, okay, this is what we need for the corridor width. I know we're not going to build it in the future, but before it gets gobbled up with a developer saying, I understand you want to put a road here, but you got no legal description for me to dedicate, and nor do I have to. So I was hoping we could, do that study to kind of tie that up, take it to the next step that, we can use federal money on. And I was looking forward to, I think it's a pretty simple legal description. You give us what's a corridor, 460 feet? Each side gives us, half of that. And that's a pretty easy legal description to write. I was hoping we could get that going because we did run the section line. I was hoping that's what the scope of work would be. So to my next point, it looks like we have $200,000. Is that really, well, that's what we got, but can we do a substantial study with that in mind?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Norm. I think that's a good call. I don't have a good feel for whether that's enough to, do a assessment and write some legals or not, but we certainly could.
I guess I'd like to tack. Yeah, since we're discussing as a TAC, we got Crackerjack Vinny coming on and Daniel, and maybe Dan Gabbio could help us with, I did get a copy of that ADOT scope that was done somewhere out down in the valley. It'd be nice as a TAC, as we talk about our work plan, what our current focus is next year. This may be, in my opinion, what we have a big focus on as a planning organization. This is going to be a significant quarter, in my opinion, because they're taking down full sections out there pretty regularly. So I'd like to know if that's going to be something we focus on as a TAC. That's my comment for the TAC.
Right, and I'll jump in, Norm. This is Frank. Yeah, I agree. Even with the discussion 6 months ago, I believe I was in full agreement that with the development going on, that's a crucial corridor, even over the Prescott Valley area, but it affects Chino and to some degree Prescott as well. So at least my opinion is I'm fully on board with what you and Dan both are saying. So, all right, any other comments we need to look at or comments for Allison and Daniel and Vinny as far as what they need to do to bring this back next month?
Allison, good job capturing what we talked about here 6 months ago. I know we haven't met, but yes, I'm glad that we're pursuing Great Western. You've done a good job of what I understood from the minutes, so thank you for that. It's very easily understood.
Thank you very much. I guess my only request would be direction for the FY24 25 and 26 years, and the funding that we have to program there. I think in the past, it's worked well for the TAC to get together via a working group session to talk about projects to program. But this could also be something we bring up at the March meeting.
Allison and Frank, this is Dan Gabbio. If I could just make a comment. For myself and maybe others who haven't looked into the regional transportation plan in a while, maybe for the March meeting, if you could just kind of bring up that and the priority recommendations from that for us to review, that might be helpful for us to confirm which projects for the outer years to your task there, Allison.
Okay, thank you.
Even just a list is fine. We don't need to run through the entire RTP, just to refresh my memory at least, and anyone else who's interested. That would be appreciated.
Sure.
And what are the thoughts on having a work session for this? Does TAC have any thoughts on that?
I don't have a big.
I'm happy to comment. Go ahead, Dan.
I don't have a big objection to a work session. I don't think it has to be overly lengthy. It's a matter of just pulling up the transportation planning document and talking about things. I think it's important that we have all members present for it. We're missing a key component of that today. I fully understand Ian had a conflict, but that's a big player in this in CYMPO as well. So if we can find a time that'll work for everyone, I don't object.
And I guess I agree with you, Dan. We just got done with our transportation plan. That's what's supposed to guide us. That's why we did the public transportation plan. But I might comment, while we're looking 3 years out, do we really have to fill that slot? It's nice as planners to look that far out, but I think we got some guidance there of what some of that is. So we got our next year's plan. Do we really need to do it? Looking out.
And if I may, you never know what'll come out of our ASRs we got going on. I mean, what if there's an opportunity to, and I know it's not really planning, which I know is important to Norm, but what if we have an opportunity to throw in a little seed money towards one of these projects to get it jump started or something like that? Is that something that the TAC and the executive board would consider? I'd love to see one of these things get moving forward, and maybe something like the 69-169 intersection improvements or something like that are already in the possibility of being programmed or something like that. But if there's a little bit of local contribution through CYMPO or not, just through local agencies, maybe that's something worth considering too. So I think a work study session is a good avenue for us to at least talk about it. It has been a while since we talked about it, and of course maybe we aim for a time after Vinny is on board as well, and he can be a part of that discussion in a formal sense.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Dan, I appreciate that, and I would like to encourage that. And just a reminder, my first day I'm starting is Monday, March the 8th. If you stick with your regularly scheduled TAC, I believe your next one would be the week prior to my start. So if you stick with that, we're kind of in the same boat of I'm more than happy to participate, but I'm still not official, if you will, versus if you were to, if you could make the exception and move the regularly TAC meeting to the following week that I start, that would be great. And then to Dan's point, again, I would encourage a work session completely. Great idea. Dan's point doesn't have to be too lengthy. We can get through what we need to, but yeah. So if the chair and the TAC are willing to have Allison send you out some maybe dates or information that can survey you, I think that first week that I'm on board, we can hit the ground running with everything you're talking about.
Mr. Chair and Allison, this is Dan Gabbio. I just want to confirm that we do have the flexibility to do that, as the Norm suggested. If we want to defer some years in the TIP to a later time, that's okay. We also don't necessarily have to submit a new TIP each year. It's a 4-year document. A new one is only required to be submitted every 4 years. Allison, can you confirm the last year that a new TIP was approved, submitted and approved?
Sure, that would have been the last round, so 2 years ago. But I can tell you that we are currently working off of Amendment 9 on that. So I think it would be helpful if we could adopt and approve a new document at this time.
Absolutely. I just wanted to confirm with the TAC what our options are here to meet requirements. So we could defer those outer years. We could also, if we do that, we just need to identify that there's funding in the TIP for a future study or project or activity. So we just need to identify that as a placeholder, so to speak, if we were to defer a decision there. So either way is fine. If we do want to move forward with approving a new TIP, a new fiscal year 22 through 26 fresh TIP, if we will, then we still have a little bit of time to do that, but CYMPO would need to submit the approved TIP to ADOT in the June timeframe in order for it to be approved by ADOT and Federal Highway Administration per ADOT schedule. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess my other question was going back to the HSIP issue. If we do a work session for this, would it be appropriate to maybe also discuss what a scope for if CYMPO decides to bring on a consultant to look at a safety study, would that be appropriate for that meeting too, or would that, or am I maybe throwing too much stuff into one meeting, so to speak?
Mr. Chair, if I can comment on that, we as staff can do that. That's no problem. I kind of, again, to Dan's earlier point, Dan Sherry's earlier point, we can keep it relatively simple. It's I will provide it to you, but it's going to be a one-page scope, and I'm just going to use the example we're using in Havasu, and it's literally 5-year crash data analysis HSIP application. So happy to bring that, and by all means, as a TAC, you're welcome to add and ask questions, but it's going to be fairly straightforward, but we are, as staff, happy to put that on the agenda.
You're not saying an engineer is trying to overthink something, are you? So.
Never would a planner ever say that, ever.
Okay. Yeah, so I think, Allison, at least maybe look at some dates, send out some emails, and see if we can get a consensus on maybe a quick work session on this. I think would be a good idea.
Absolutely. And should I send some dates out for postponing the TAC meeting or after Vinny's start date?
Yeah,
that'll work for me, but try to avoid that week of the 15th of March, please. I will not be available that week. That happens to coincide with spring break, and I have a Grand Canyon hike planned that week, so.
Okay.
Gonna have water by then, so.
I'll be where there's water.
Okay, good. Need that water. So sometimes they don't turn it on, but it should be on by then. All right, so yeah, that sounds good. Anybody else? Maybe if we move that TAC meeting a week, I know it'd be perfect timing for Vinny just getting up here. That nothing would be going on
Not
that
his
first
first
week,
day.
right?
Just don't make it his first day.
So,
That week of the 8th actually looks pretty good for me, especially in the afternoons. So I'm sure we can find something that'll work with people.
okay. All right. And I think any other discussion on the MTIP for now?
One more thing to add for the MTIP on the transit page. It is pretty blank right now. If Allison would scroll down to that, please.
Okay.
So we are working on updating our 5305D numbers. As I think Allison might be able to chime in here, but we are looking at an increase in upcoming years. As for the rest of these blocks, they will be filled in, but applications are currently being applied for right now, so we do not know the exact funds that are going to each agency. So once I have those numbers, which should be later this summer, we can add those in and have an amendment to this document.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Any other comments or discussion?
Yeah,
Mr.
I noticed that we've got our 5-year plan for our regional road program, part of the MTIP, and it's, you know, a couple years old, and we're working on it. It'll need to be submitted to our county administrator by, I think, that first week in March, if I'm not mistaken, as a draft. The board, of course, won't approve it till later, but perhaps by April, we'll have you know, some idea of what to share, and it might just say draft on the top still, but certainly that's not a big deal for us to update that for inclusion with the MTIP. So.
Appreciate that. And we'll be requesting that from all of our member agencies.
If you take your time, you know, come somewhere around June or something, late June, it'll be finalized, and maybe we can swap it in at that point too. So.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
And then, Mr. Chair, if I can ask, after you've officially adjourned the meeting, if I could just have 1 minute after the meeting's closed, I just need to ask a quick question, and then I can do some individual follow-up. But if the TAC's able to stay on, just for 1 minute after your adjournment would be helpful, please.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So without any objection, I'll move on. I think within the discussion, we discussed some, maybe some items for the next agenda. I just maybe want to hit, anybody else have any suggestions for the next agenda they want to request before we adjourn? Okay. Without that, Allison, do we need a motion to adjourn, or do we just adjourn? They do different meetings different ways.
You can decide. We don't need a motion. It's not necessary.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll adjourn, and you can stop the recording and whatever. And Vinny, I've got a minute or